Disclaimer, this video is for educational purpose. No one's rights have been violated intentionally. If it benefits you, thank us by liking, commenting and sharing it, and by subscribing the channel.
Class 12. Subject, Gen English. Book, Flamingo. Chapter 3. Deep Water. Part 2. Part 2.
The next I remember, I was lying on my stomach beside the pool vomiting. The chap that threw me in was saying, but I was only fooling. Meaning, I was only kidding. Someone said, the kid nearly died. Be all right now. Let's carry him to the locker room.
Several hours later, I walked home. I was weak and trembling. I shook and cried when I lay on my bed. I couldn't eat that night. For days a haunting fear, meaning frequently disturbing fear, was in my heart. The slightest exertion, meaning small work, upset me, making me wobbly in the knees, meaning nervous and sick to my stomach. I never went back to the pool. I feared water. I avoided it whenever I could. A few years later, when I came to know the waters of the Cascades, I wanted to get into them. And whenever I did, whether I was wading the Titan or bumping river or bathing in warm lake of the Goat Rocks, the terror that had seized me in the pool would come back. It would take possession of me completely. My legs would become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart. Cascades, Titan, bumping river, warm lake of Goat Rocks, all of them are famous water bodies. This handicap, meaning hindrance, problem, stayed with me as the years rolled by. In canoes on Maine lakes fishing for landlocked salmon, bass fishing in New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Deschutes and Metolius in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia, at Bumping Lake in the Cascades, wherever I went, the haunting fear of the water followed me. It ruined my fishing trips, deprived me of the joy of canoeing, boating, and swimming. I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but it held me firmly in its grip. Finally, one October, I decided to get an instructor and learn to swim. I went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week, an hour each day. The instructor put a belt around me. A rope attached to the belt went through a pulley, meaning a lifting machine, that ran on an overhead cable. He held onto the end of the rope, and we went back and forth across the pool, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. On each trip across the pool a bit of the panic seized me. Each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and I went under, some of the old terror returned and my legs froze. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack. Meaning, began to lessen, then he taught me to put my face under water and exhale, and to raise my nose and inhale. I repeated the exercise hundreds of times. Bit by bit I shed part of the panic that seized me when my head went under water. Next he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. For weeks I did just that. At first my legs refused to work. But they gradually relaxed, and finally I could command them. Thus, piece by piece, meaning, gradually, he built a swimmer. And when he had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. In April he said, now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool, crawl stroke. Meaning, a style of swimming. I did. The instructor was finished. But I was not finished. I still wondered if I would be terror-stricken when I was alone in the pool. I tried it. I swam the length up and down. Tiny vestiges, meaning traces, of the old terror would return. But now I could frown and say to that terror, trying to scare me, eh? Well, here's to you. Look. And off I'd go for another length of the pool. This went on until July. But I was still not satisfied. I was not sure that all the terror had left. So I went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a dock, meaning a type of port, at Triggs Island, and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stampact Island. I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. Only once did the terror return. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. The old sensation returned in miniature. Meaning, the old fear returned in small quantity. I laughed and said, well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me? It fled and I swam on. Yet I had residual doubts. At my first opportunity, one hurried west, went up the tight to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Creek Trail to Mead Glacier, and camped in the high meadow by the side of Warm Lake. The next morning I stripped, meaning I took off clothes, dived into the lake, and swam across to the other shore and back, just as Doug Corporon used to do. I shouted with joy, and Gilbert Peak returned the echo. I had conquered my fear of water. The experience had a deep meaning for me, as only those who have known stark terror, meaning extreme fear, and conquered it can appreciate. In death there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said, "All we have to fear is fear itself." Because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. At last I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. The end of the lesson. Homework. 1.
Dear students, from this lesson we learned, where there is a will, there is a way. With strong will and strong determination, we can overcome our all fears. Douglas, he was scared of water. He would never think of swimming in a small swimming pool, not to mention a big river, a big lake. But he tells us how he got rid of that fear and how a person who was so scared of water became a great swimmer. Now homework for you.
1. How did the instructor build a swimmer out of Douglas? 2. How did Douglas make sure that he conquered the old terror?
Disclaimer, this video is for education.
Now, my dear students, as you know, that these two questions are as homework for you. Write answers to these questions and send those answers to me on my WhatsApp number.